On May 19th, 2012, Shriya Shah-Klorfine lay slumped in the snow, her body wrapped in a Canadian flag. At 8,400 meters above sea level, she was alone, exhausted, and running out of time. The wind howled around her, biting through her layers of clothing as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the icy slopes of Mount Everest. This was the moment her dream of standing on top of the world turned into a nightmare. Just hours earlier, she had reached the summit, the pinnacle of her ambition. But now, as she struggled to move, her body failing her, the mountains seemed to mock her. The air was so thin that every breath felt like a battle. Her fingers, numb from the cold, fumbled with her oxygen mask. She knew she was in trouble, but the thought of giving up never crossed her mind. She had come too far to quit now. Around her, the other climbers pressed on, their faces hidden behind goggles and masks. No one stopped to help. In the death zone, above 8,000 meters, survival is a solo mission. Shriya's dream had brought her here, but it was her lack of experience that would keep her from leaving. Shriya Shah-Klorfine wasn't your typical mountaineer. Born in Nepal, she had dreamed of climbing Everest since she was a child. Her father had taken her on a helicopter tour over the mountain when she was just 9 years old.
I remember the view, that was just the sunlight, just about like 50 feet I can watch the summit of the Mount Everest, and it was like breathtaking, the view. And I was thinking one day I will do that.
And the sight of its towering peak left a lasting impression. One day, she thought, I'll stand on top of the world. But Shriya was no seasoned climber. She had no high-altitude experience, no technical skills, and no real understanding of the dangers she would face. What she did have was an unshakable belief in herself. She fundraised tirelessly, promoted her climb on social media, and even exaggerated her experience to secure a spot on an expedition. For Shriya, Everest wasn't just a mountain, it was her destiny. Everest is no ordinary mountain. Since the first successful summit in 1953, over 300 climbers have died on its slopes, many of them inexperienced, like Shriya. The mountain doesn't care about your dreams, your determination, or your story. It only respects skill, preparation, and a healthy dose of luck. For every triumphant climber who reaches the summit, there are others who never make it back down. In 2012, the year Shriya attempted her climb, Everest was more crowded and more dangerous than ever. Low-cost expedition companies were flooding the mountain with underprepared climbers, turning the world's highest peak into a deadly gamble. Shriya was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The mountain's brutal conditions, unpredictable weather, and the physical toll of climbing in the death zone would test her in ways she could never have imagined. Shriya's journey to Everest began long before she set foot on the mountain. She joined an expedition organized by Utmost Adventure Trekking, a company known for offering low-cost climbs to aspiring mountaineers. Despite her lack of experience, Shriya was determined to prove herself. She had trained as best she could, climbing stairs with a weighted backpack, practicing on indoor rock walls, and hiking in local parks. But nothing could truly prepare her for the brutal reality of Everest. When she arrived at base camp, the first warning signs appeared. The Sherpas, seasoned guides who had spent their lives on the mountain, noticed her struggling with basic skills. She fumbled with her crampons. The spiked boots needed to grip the ice and hesitated on the rickety aluminum ladders that spanned deep crevasses. Veteran expedition leader Russell Bryce, who was also on the mountain that year, canceled his climb due to unsafe conditions. He warned others to do the same, but Shriya refused to listen. For her, turning back wasn't an option. She had poured her heart, soul, and savings into this climb. The summit was within reach, and she was willing to risk everything to get there. But as she would soon discover, Everest doesn't reward determination. It punishes mistakes. On May 18, 2012, Shriya began her final push to the summit. The night was bitterly cold, the air so thin that every step felt like a marathon. Clad in layers of down and Gore-Tex, she joined a long line of climbers snaking their way up the mountain. The route was overcrowded, a result of too many expeditions vying for the same narrow path. In the death zone, above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to shut down. Every minute without oxygen is a gamble with death. As Shriyah climbed higher, the challenges multiplied. The fixed ropes, meant to guide climbers safely up the mountain, became tangled and chaotic. At one point, she found herself stuck in a human traffic jam, waiting for hours as climbers ahead of her struggled to move. The delay was deadly. Oxygen supplies dwindled and the weather began to turn. Winds whipped across the exposed slopes and the temperature plummeted. Shriyah's strength was fading fast, but the summit was so close she could almost touch it. Against all odds, she reached the top. For a brief moment, she stood on the roof of the world, her Canadian flag fluttering in the thin air. But the triumph was short-lived. The descent, often more dangerous than the ascent, loomed ahead. Exhausted and oxygen-deprived, Shriyah began her journey back down. She had no way of knowing that the mountain had one final, cruel lesson in store for her. On her way down from the summit, Shriyah was in bad shape. She was exhausted, her oxygen was almost gone, and the freezing cold was making it hard to think clearly. At 8,400 meters, near a spot called the balcony, she collapsed. She couldn't go any further. Her body had given out. The Sherpas with her tried to help. They gave her oxygen and did their best to keep her moving, but it wasn't enough. Shriyah was too weak to stand, let alone climb down the mountain. In the death zone, every second counts. The Sherpas faced an impossible choice: stay with Shriyah and risk their own lives, or leave her behind to save themselves. In the end, they had no choice but to go. They wrapped her in a Canadian flag and continued down the mountain, hoping someone else might find her. Hours later, another Sherpa came across Shriyah. She was still alive, but barely. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold, and her breathing shallow. He tried to revive her, urging her to move, but her strength was gone. Her body, starved of oxygen and ravaged by the cold, could no longer respond. She could only make faint, unintelligible sounds, the life draining out of her with each passing moment. The Sherpa, realizing there was nothing more he could do, took one final photograph of Shriyah wrapped in the Canadian flag she had carried to the summit. It was a haunting image, a stark reminder of the mountain's unforgiving nature. With a heavy heart, he turned and continued his descent, leaving her to the mountain's icy embrace. Alone on the mountain, Shriyah's dream of conquering Everest had turned into a fight for survival, one she couldn't win. Her body would remain on the slopes, a silent testament to the cost of chasing dreams in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Shriyah was one of 10 climbers who died on Everest in 2012, a year that highlighted the dangers of overcrowding and inexperience. Her story sparked outrage and debate. Many questioned the ethics of low-cost expedition companies that allowed unprepared climbers like Shriyah to attempt the summit. Calls for stricter regulations grew louder, but little changed. Everest remains a symbol of human ambition, drawing hundreds of climbers each year, many of whom are just as unprepared as Shriyah was. Her death was a stark reminder of the mountain's dangers, but for some, the allure of standing on top of the world is too strong to resist. Shriya Shah-Klorfine's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the cost of chasing dreams. Everest will always be there, but our lives are fragile. Her tragedy teaches us that ambition, no matter how powerful, must be balanced with preparation, respect for nature, and an understanding of our limits. Let's honor her memory by chasing our dreams, safely and responsibly, because in the end, no summit is worth a life. As the debate over Everest's commercialization continues, Shriyah's story serves as a cautionary tale. The mountain's deadly allure will always draw adventurers, but it's up to us to ensure that those who attempt the climb are prepared for the challenges ahead. Let's remember Shriyah, not just for her ambition, but for the lessons she left behind. Her dream may have ended in tragedy, but her story lives on as a reminder of the fragile line between ambition and recklessness.